And welcome to the Midday Show. I am Jeff Ever. He is Mark Messina. And joining us today, a political guru, Vince Galko. I hope I said that right, Vince.
That's correct.
There we go. To talk about tonight's debate in Pennsylvania between Dr. Oz and Bloomsburg's own Dave McCormick, and much, much more. We got some other stuff. We talked about election endorsements before. We're going to dive into some other things. Maybe even the Yankees pitching staff, as Vince brought up before the show had started.
Yes.
Vince, this is going to be unbelievably underwhelming. However, we start every show off with asking Mark the same question. And that question is, how are you feeling today?
I don't understand why it's underwhelming.
It's just lately you just keep talking about the weather and your allergies.
Well, you know, and I'll say this. I showed my adult discipline yesterday. It was gorgeous yesterday.
Okay.
I essentially stayed inside at all times because once the allergies get flowing, like it's going to suck till mid-June. So I'm trying to delay it. So there is this aspect where normal people want to go out and enjoy the sunshine. Everybody on earth cut their grass yesterday. It would have been a disaster for people like me. So I showed my discipline. I stayed inside.
So you were like Jake Gyllenhaal in Bubble Boy.
Never saw Bubble Boy, but yes, that was basically me.
Bubble Boy would have been a good name for you.
And one of the things that I saw while I was sitting inside was I got this thing that this debate was tonight. And we so that's why we kind of have gone down this path. And I sent a text out to our group. And the reason we have Vince on here is just to talk about how unique this spring has been. We're inundated with advertisements. It seems like a fall of election year, not a primary season. When you mix in Dr. Oz is running for Senate here in Pennsylvania, and he's obviously a worldwide celebrity. So we have a lot of this is a big deal. And since they're debating tonight, we just thought, people should know, and we should give a little pregame as to what we expect and how unprecedented this is and what's really at stake tonight.
Well, Vince, thanks for coming on with us. We're going to actually let you talk. I know that some people, have to wait 3-4 minutes before they get to talk on the show. But Vince, thanks for coming on. Go ahead. Can you just give everybody the 30-second, 60-second rundown? Introduce yourself for anybody who may not know you.
Sure. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for having me on. I appreciate it. I love your part of the state. It's one of my favorite parts of the state. My family and I spent a lot of time there, from Little League Museum to swim meets down at Bucknell and everywhere in between. And my son's going to be a freshman next year at Bloomsburg, so we love your part of the state. Awesome. My background is I've been doing Republican politics, I think, since the late 1990s in Pennsylvania. Started my career working in the basement of the Republican National Committee, cold calling for money for the Dole Kemp campaign, and went on to work for United States Senators Rick Santorum, Martin Spector, Pat Toomey. Did work on campaign staffs, official staffs, and in 2004, I ran President Bush's reelection here in Pennsylvania and was the executive director of the Pennsylvania Republican Party. And since that time, I've been, dabbling in the world of government affairs and public affairs, but also keeping one foot in the campaign world as well to, just keep my contacts fresh and be able to do shows like this.
Well, and the reason that this seat is open is because Pat Toomey's retiring. So did that come as a shock to you when he announced that he wasn't going to run again?
It did not. I mean, certainly would love this to happen there. He's been a great force, I think, for conservatives and especially for fiscal conservatives in Washington. But I think at the same time, a lot of folks have been, just get a little sick and tired of the atmosphere there. Just the stalemate that we're in. It's no longer about achieving things. It's about how many times you can get on cable news and how much money you could raise. And it seems like compromise has left Washington, and I think Senator Toomey is someone who wants to get things done. He's been a success all his life, and I could see that where that could frustrate him, and he'd want to find some other avenues to pursue.
So, okay, well, tonight, let's just start with the primary season. We talked for 30 seconds before we went on the air, but just how unique is this, not only in Pennsylvania, but nationally, for there to be this much money and this much attention on a primary?
Yeah, it's like nothing we've ever seen before. There's some candidates in this race that got in with some of their own money, or raised some money, spent $1, $2, $3, $4 million worth of money so far, and it's not even making a dent. Usually that would be enough to get you into the game and put you in a good position to win. But when you have candidates spending $15, $20 million for the past 4 months, not even just for the past 4 weeks, it's like nothing we've ever seen. I think it rivals the the primary down in Florida a few years ago with Rick Scott. And I think that we could break that record. I mean, we're probably, when we consider all the candidates, are closing in probably on $50 million spent on the Republican side. That's not even mentioning the Democratic side for a primary, which is incredible.
That's I did not know it was that much. I knew it was higher than normal, but
I didn't know either.
I did not know it was 4 to 5 times higher than what the standard of getting yourself into the game.
Yeah. Now, when you take in, not just television ads, but obviously when you're talking about Oz and McCormick, they have big staffs, a lot of high-paid consultants, and everything from yard signs to digital advertising. So, they're spending tens of millions of dollars just on TV, but when you factor in everything else, it's amazing the amount of money that's being spent.
Is there, like, in your opinion, like, is there a cap to some of that? Like, at what point would some of these people kind of be like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and something that I think campaign managers and consultants and candidates and media folks have asked for years. At what point do you get diminishing returns on this type of stuff? But I think when you're as far in as McCormick and Oz are, you can't stop at this point. You can't let up. It's like the old McDonald's versus Burger King or Home Depot versus Lowe's, right? If your opponent's up, you better be up too. But the key in campaigns nowadays is finding those alternative venues, certainly digital, email, phone calls, whatever it might be. Text messaging is very important. But you can't discount in a race like this good old grassroots as well. Knocking on someone's door, having a volunteer knock on someone's door, call someone, and having a strong presence on election day, because we've seen time and time again where someone will be the front runner going into election day, but if they have no ground game, no grassroots, they end up losing because you may have a lot of people supporting you, but if they don't come out to vote, it doesn't do you any good. So you have to have that ground game that gets your people out to vote.
Vince, before we dive into the Oz and McCormick, and Mark kind of dives into that with you, can you just background wise, how did you get started? Were you one of those grassroots people when you were younger, kind of going door to door? Like, how did you dive into this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess I always had an interest in politics. I ran for student council, was always involved in student government type of stuff. And then after college, I moved to DC. I had some buddies who were working in DC, and kind of just went door to door with my resume to my congressman and some others, and ended up getting a referral to as I mentioned, the Republican National Committee was looking to hire folks. And as a political junkie who was, 21 years old, going to work at the RNC every day was the greatest thing in the world. And so I started working there. Then I had decided I wanted to come back and get my master's degree. So I enrolled at the University of Scranton to get my master's degree in history. And while I was there, I started an internship with Senator Specter's office. And then in the year 2000, I went on to become the regional political director for Rick Santorum's race, which encompassed kind of Northeast and North Central Pennsylvania. So I ran his race for that area in 2000. And then I was kind of off to the races at that point, went to work for the state Republican Party as political director. And as I mentioned, just kind of bounced around different campaigns, statewide races from governor, Senate, and other things. And, eventually decided to, make some money with all my connections and support my family. So I decided to do a consulting business, and I've been doing that now for the past 14 years.
All right, so here's my first question, and this is something I probably should know because I like to think that I'm a learned individual, but I have no idea. So how is Dr. Oz running in Pennsylvania? Has he ever lived in Pennsylvania? What are the rules of, do you just need to own property? I remember this came up with Hillary when she all of a sudden was running in New York, and you're like, I thought they were from Arkansas. So what are the rules with this where people can run?
Yeah, they vary by state, but Dr. Oz, I believe, has lived in Pennsylvania at a time going to school, and he has a residence here now. The rules for running for federal office are much different than running for state office. For state office, you have to live in the district you're running in for a certain amount of years. I don't want to give the incorrect information, but to run for governor, it's so many years. To run for state senate, so many years. To run for state house, it's so many years. So you can't just move into the district and run, which is the funny thing, because a lot of these folks would be ineligible running for governor because they wouldn't make the residency requirements. But because the requirements for Senate, you need to be a resident on the day you're circulating petitions, and they qualify. And they all have various roots, whether it's Dave McCormick, Mehmet Oz, or Carla Sands. They've all, either born and raised here, spent time here. Their family has roots here, so they're making that connection.
Well, I think, was it Sands that you just met? And there are other people in this debate. There are 3 other people other than McCormick and Oz. And one of them you just mentioned was Carla Sands. Wasn't she the U.S. ambassador to something? She has like a big political title, didn't she?
Yes, she was a U.S. ambassador. I believe it was Finland was one of the Scandinavian countries, I believe. But she was, yes, U.S. ambassador there. Her, I think, her late husband were big supporters for the party for a long time as well. And she, it's my understanding, she grew up in the Harrisburg area, the Cumberland County area, before moving to California.
Because I saw in the way these people got on the debate, from what I read, is they did some poll, and anyone who you had to score a certain percentage to make the TV debate. And as much as we've seen McCormick and as much as we've seen Dr. Oz, all 5 of the people that are on stage tonight were within 10 percentage points of each other as far as this polling back when it started. So these 3 that the normal people like me, the layperson, know less about or know nothing about, what do they have a chance? And obviously tonight is crucial for them.
Yeah, first to address the poll issue or the debate issue, I think the criteria was you had to spend or raise $250,000 at least. You have to have a physical campaign address, and you needed to be at 5% in this poll, which I understandably you want to narrow the field down at a certain point. But I also think it's they probably should have just let everybody in there, because when you have 50% of the electorate who's undecided, 5% isn't all that much. You had a good candidate like George Paquetto, a lawyer from Philly, running. He was at 3.8%. I think the Gale from Montgomery County was at 2 something. So, my sense is when you have that many undecided voters, why not have them all in the debate? But that's just how it works. And that's why they debated to decided on these 5. As far as their chances going forward, I mean, like as I mentioned, there's depending on which poll you look at, between 40 and 50% of the electorate has not made up their mind. And when you ask Oz or McCormick supporters how deep is their support, I think it was something like 80% of them are saying they're still open to changing their mind. So then, their support may be a little bit wide, but it's certainly not deep. And if there was a way for Bartos or Barnett or Stephen Sands to find a way to break through, but the thing is, it's just being drowned out now because of all the television advertising, and the Trump endorsement obviously plays a big part of this as well. And so it's going to be difficult for them to break through. But because it's, if you were to tell me there was 25% of the electorate undecided, I'd say there's no way. But when you're getting this high up, and if they, campaigns are funny, right? If they have the right message and can get enough exposure over a 2-week period, you never know what could happen. And at the same time, one of the, McCormick or Oz could certainly stumble, make a big mistake in the coming days.
Vince, can you put those numbers into context? Like in a normal primary race, where would those numbers typically be as far as like undecided voters?
Yeah, I mean, getting this close to the race, they certainly wouldn't be at 50%. They could be anywhere between 10 and 20%, maybe a little bit higher. But that's what you're looking at. But you're also in those kind of races, you're down to 2 or 3 candidates at this point, where we still have 5, actually more than that, running on the ballot. And I think the fact that, as you pointed out earlier, the fact that neither of these gentlemen have really spent much time here. People get that, so they understand they're trying to somewhat kind of move in and take the election. I think that's not setting well with people, and the negative advertising is certainly having an effect. So no one is really in love with either of these candidates. It's going to come down to, who's most acceptable and who has the best chance of winning in November. And I think that's what will decide. And as I mentioned, it'll come down to who has the best ground game.
So one of the things that we talked about maybe a week or 2 ago was about endorsements, and because obviously Trump is on the Republican side, has been so polarizing, and there's still the debates about January 6th and stuff like that. And on the other side, we talked about with Biden, because his approval rating is obviously not through the roof. So usually you would clamor for these endorsements, and depending on where you're at regionally or whatever, some of these places people might actually want to stay away from the endorsements, depending on which party you are and things like that. One of the things, and then after that, we've noticed, Oz was endorsed by Trump, and McCormick is running ads, even though he didn't get the endorsement, where there are actually Trump flags behind in the background. I'm guessing you've never seen anything like that.
No, it's the fact that the way that they are certainly pandering to the Trump voters is unbelievable, but understandable at the same time when you see the the influence you have. I think that the biggest thing most voters have to understand, especially those looking from the outside, non-primary voters, maybe Democrats, independents, need to understand is that the Pennsylvania Republican primary voter is dramatically different than a general election voter. They are much more narrow on the issues that matter to them. They demand much more allegiance to the party and to the conservative values, and they're much more conservative overall. The issues of life and guns and strong national defense and other things are much more important to a Republican primary voter than they would be to a general election voter, which is why you have such a strong adherence to people wanting the support of President Trump and his message. For a long time in politics, endorsements were meant a lot more, because if you receive the endorsement of someone, especially a former president or a governor or U.S. senator, member of Congress, it meant something because that person's name was on the line then, right? It was if if a member of Congress endorsed someone, that member of Congress made sure that person won, because that was their name on the line then. Otherwise, if people they endorse start losing, their endorsement doesn't mean anything. Endorsements today are much more, thrown about much easier today, as far as, oh, I've been endorsed by this group or this person. It's just something we just throw out there, and sometimes they don't have the weight that they used to. If you're going to be endorsed, you want a couple things to come with it. One, you want an army of volunteers that whoever is doing the endorser can provide to you, and you'd love some financial support, whether it's directly from the person endorsing or from their network. And if President Trump was able to deliver those things to Dr. Oz, that would be a big boost for his campaign. So we'll see what remains to be seen. I mean, McCormick's rolling out endorsements himself from various Trump officials and other former elected officials. The biggest battle is going to be in this race is, can McCormick outspend the Trump endorsement? And that's really the thing that's going to happen at this point. What I think is going to happen is, I think McCormick can battle, and if Oz slips up here or there, or if they find some more damning evidence against Oz on something, I think McCormick has a chance. What's more likely is that over the course of the next, 10 to 14 days, I think a lot of McCormick's support will start eroding away. Not because he's not a good candidate or he's not running a good campaign, just that the loyalty factor that President Trump, people looking forward, whether it's his staff, his consultants, or just generally party chairman, right? Party chairman who may be neutral or supporting McCormick now have to decide, do I want to be against the former president? And that's going to be the determining factor going forward, is how much loyalty McCormick can demand from his staff, his consultants, and his grassroots team.
So one of the things that we had talked about with that is, like, is it possible for Trump to water down a Trump endorsement too much? And from what I'm hearing you say, it sounds as if that might not even be possible. Is it possible for Trump to water down an endorsement to the point where it doesn't mean as much? Or is it just such a force behind him that it doesn't matter if he decides to endorse hundreds of candidates across the country?
He's been pretty selective. When he was in office as president, he was rolling out, 5 endorsements a day for different people. But, he's been a little more selective this time around. He certainly endorsed a good number of people, but some of them are pretty much slam dunk incumbents that, we're going to win with or without his endorsement. But others in races like this, he's definitely making a case that he can, affect it. Can he water it down? I don't know that's possible. The one thing I've seen, though, over time is that Trump, people that have been endorsed by President Trump, they don't always win. Certainly some of them have lost. But the people that he goes after never win, it seems. It seems like, it's okay if he endorses your opponent, but when he comes after you, it's much more damning than if he endorses your opponent. If he were to start taking direct shots at McCormick or others, he did it in the governor's race, obviously. So that seems to matter more when he attacks someone rather than when he endorses someone.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the anti-endorsement is something we did not bring up during our conversation.
So do you think, not to put yourself in Donald Trump's head, but like Oz is like Trump. He's a political outsider. He's a TV celebrity. Do you think that was the cause to just reinforce the fact of, hey, I was a president, I was successful. They are bringing political outsiders into the game is more of what we need. And he reminds me of me in a way. Do you think that's why the Oz connection was there? Or do you think there's something deeper than that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any inside knowledge. I see what I read and what the gossip and what I hear from other people. It seems like there was a strong relationship between the former First Lady and Dr. Oz. That played a factor. Good friendship there. But I also, President Trump in his remarks when he endorsed Oz made the case of saying that, this guy's a celebrity. He knows how to persuade a large audience. He's popular with people, and that's more than half the battle when you're running for office. If he can get tens of millions of people to follow him and watch him and buy his products, he's already, halfway there to victory as a candidate. And I think that had a big part of it as well.
No, I think it was the first part when you said the wife came home and said, "Listen, Donald, you're endorsing this guy," and he said, "Okay, dear."
Yeah, I mean, it certainly couldn't have been an easy. I mean, Dave McCormick's wife, Dina Powell, was a high-ranking official in Trump's administration. I know several, Trump staffers, Trump campaign people, White House staff that are working for McCormick now. So certainly couldn't have been an easy decision. I'm sure he was getting a lot of pressure from both sides to endorse. And I was a little bit shocked that he didn't. I figured he'd maybe wait a little bit longer. So I was a little surprised that he endorsed when he did.
Could you see that? Could you see Trump going up to McCormick and like, "Listen, the wife, she's really good friends with Dr. Oz. Like, I just didn't want to cause problems at home.
Right.
Like, I got enough issues I'm dealing with. I didn't need her pissed off at me too."
So you hinted at this a little bit. So just completely your opinion, because we like to think out loud on the show. In your opinion, then, what should McCormick be leaning into? How should he go? Like, in your opinion, should he be putting like the Trump flags in the back of his ads, even though he already knows Oz is endorsed?
Yeah, I think it's a smart move because I think that,
Okay.
the knee-jerk reaction when he endorsed Oz, I'm sure McCormick had it. I'm sure people, advising him had it, was to, all right, fight back, denounce the endorsement, denounce Oz, say Trump made a mistake. But then you have to realize that's not going to get you much, right? He's still going to be Donald Trump, and Oz is still going to have the endorsement, and Republican primary voters are going to, by and large, listen to what President Trump has to say. So I think they were smart into, kind of leaning into it a little bit, still embracing President Trump, reassuring those voters that whether it's Oz or McCormick, they're both going to, carry the Trump line down going forward. If I was McCormick right now, he has to continue to make the case that, find ways to show that Oz is a flawed candidate. But McCormick really needs to make the case that he is the best one to win in November. And Oz is certainly making the same case, obviously, but it's getting to the point now where I think they've both shown their loyalty to Republican principles, conservative principles. They've both shown that they, certainly have the qualifications in the background to do this, and they've both shown that they are loyal to President Trump. So it comes down to now is, who can deliver in November.
You had mentioned with all the numbers and just kind of everything that's still up in the air, I guess would be the term I would use. Is this one of those like could a long shot? Is this like one of those opportunities where someone who isn't even on in the debate could actually come through in this because of the way the numbers are polling right now?
I think without the Trump endorsement, I would say much more likely that would happen. But with the Trump endorsement, it makes it a little bit harder. Because I mean, I can tell you that I've spoken to candidates who were running in this race that weren't named Oz or McCormick, and that was their strategy: let the two of them fight it out, bruise each other up as much as possible, and then towards the end, kind of sneak up the middle there and come through as the victor. The problem is now with Trump's endorsement, it kind of makes that a little bit more difficult. But also at the same time, when people were having those strategy talks, they thought, okay, maybe Oz and McCormick might spend $5 or $10 million, and then certainly that they spent that much in the first 6 weeks, and so that kind of changes the strategy a bit.
So then tonight, going into the debate, do you think it's basically Oz's people are just telling him don't screw up? Like, you don't have to be great, just don't be bad?
Yeah, I mean, rule number one in a debate is always do no harm, right? Unfortunately, debates don't have as much impact as people think. If you think about even the presidential debates you've watched over the years, the only time they matter is when someone really screws up or if someone has a tremendous line. Reagan had a few great lines, and the whole, Lloyd Benson line over Dan Quayle, you're no John Kennedy. Those are the kind of things we remember from debates. But overall, debates are pretty forgettable. And the people who are watching the debates most often have their mind made up already because they're the most in tune voters. But there's still a handful of undecideds that are going to watch it. But I think if you're advising Oz or McCormick at this point, especially Oz, it's just do no harm. McCormick has to be a little bit more aggressive at this point, mainly because of the Trump endorsement, and it seems some of the public polling that has come out that he's pulling away a little bit, certainly not by a lot, but a few percentage points. Now, if you're Jeff Bartos, Kathy Barnett, or Carla Sands, you need to go on the offensive. I mean, you have to stay aggressive and try to trip one of them up. The problem is, it's hard to take on two of them. So the decisions they're going to have to make is, do they attack one of them? If I'm Oz, I'm expecting all the guns pointed at me tonight. They're all going to be firing at Oz. Maybe somebody takes a different tact. I don't know this is the case, but maybe somebody takes a tact where I'm going to go after McCormick and disqualify him. And once he's disqualified or he makes a mistake, then we'll go after Oz. But my guess is that that stage is going to be pretty angry towards Dr. Oz tonight.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Do you have any more questions about the debate?
Well, I was just going to say, so after tonight, you obviously know all these candidates, but for the rest of us who only know McCormick and Oz, and there's a couple others, do you think when we walk out tonight, it's down to like 3? Are you guessing that one of the others makes enough of a name for themselves that they at least stay a contender, or is tonight not this vital?
Well, it'll be interesting. There was a poll that came out last week that showed Kathy Barnett within striking distance. I think she was, somewhere in the low teens, maybe. So she was, within striking distance. She certainly has the personality to light up the stage and the conservative credentials to do that. It'll be a little bit harder for Bartos and Sands. They've been a little more, conservative in their methods. So they're going to really have to come out and be aggressive. Looking at it right now, I still think it's going to be a 2-person race after tonight. But there's always that chance that McCormick or Oz, could say something on life, on guns, on immigration that they don't mean to say, but it comes out and it can be twisted into a 30-second commercial, and it can end the campaign pretty quickly. That's happened to candidates in the past where they've, said something on reforming Social Security or on immigration or something that's perceived to be racist, and dooms the campaign pretty quickly. So, as I mentioned, I think it's just a matter of do no harm. And if I'm Oz, I have my 4 or 5 bullet points, and no matter what question is asked, I'm going back to those 4 or 5 bullet points, whatever they might be.
Read my lips. Oh, sorry.
I wanted to ask you if you had any thoughts of the other side, any thoughts on the Democratic primary.
Yeah, I mean, that's been interesting. I think it's been pretty much, Fetterman from the start. Excuse me. I think it's been John Fetterman's race to lose from the start. The Democratic Party is, certainly been taken over by the woke mob. I think they've much more progressive, much more liberal than the Democratic Party from even 4 or 5 years ago. Fetterman fits that role. Fetterman is an extremely wealthy person. His family's very wealthy, so he has endless funds, and he's able to raise a ton of money as well because of his positions. Connor Lamb is probably better positioned for November for the Democrats, but he certainly having trouble breaking through with the Democratic primary voter. Much like the Republican primary voter, Democratic primary voter has changed greatly. They're much more concerned about social issues and other things than mom and pop kitchen table type of issues.
So let me ask, and this is just a general election question that I've always wondered. Like we get in this debate tonight, does the Republican committee fear? So you take your 2 front runners, and McCormick's going to say why Oz shouldn't win, and he's a terrible candidate, and Oz is going to say why McCormick, or vice versa. But then once one of them wins, the party wants the rest of the party to get behind this person. So is this just a game that politics plays, that they expect that McCormick's people, even if he says, if I really support McCormick and I say this bad thing about Oz, and this is why Oz shouldn't win, and this is why he shouldn't run, but then Oz does get the nomination, isn't there a fear that they lose those voters somewhere? Or are they just believe that they're that in tune with the party that they're going to vote whoever wins?
That's a great question. And I would tell you that's, that depends on the year to year and on the environment. I've been a part of a lot of, the process all along with these candidates where they've interviewed before different committees and different caucuses. And every time the question is asked, if you don't win, will you support the eventual nominee? And they all say, of course, we're going to support the eventual nominee. The most important thing is taking back the U.S. Senate. I expect it to be the line tonight when the question is asked that they'll, if they lose, that they'll support the nominee. But you obviously, there's still sour grapes. There's still issues where you lose some people after a primary that they don't rally around the nominee. The thing that's different this time around is that the motivation of the Republican voter right now is just through the roof. That we don't really have to do much as Republicans to convince our people to come out and vote or to unite beside someone. The hatred's too strong a word, but the disappointment, the anger, the concern of what's happening, both at the pump, at the grocery store, foreign affairs, whatever it might be, Republicans and even independents are very motivated to go out and vote against Democrats this fall. So I don't think that'll be much of a problem as far as people uniting with the idea that we need to take the gavel out of Chuck Schumer's hands and Nancy Pelosi's hands, and eventually get a Congress that can stand up to the president.
I mean, as you just mentioned, just because of the climate, you would suspect that the voter turnout at this midterm election is going to be way bigger than a typical midterm election, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we saw some pretty high ones in 16 with Trump, and so that was pretty, it was pretty high. But I think this could be a record-setting one. It'll be interesting to see again the intent. If it's high, I think it's more to do with people are excited to vote against Democrats and they want to send a message by turning out in this primary. Because what often happens too, though, if a race gets too negative, it actually turns voters off, and that's one of the secrets of campaigns. People say, well. Stop the negative ads, stop the negative ads. But, enough. Well, the reason you do negative ads is it's, kind of to suppress the vote too. If you want to make sure that someone's not voting for you, they're not voting at all. They're just completely turned off by the process. And so there's a certain factor where that people are going to get turned off by the negative ads. And keep in mind, you have, a pretty contested race for governor as well, which has been much more, I would say, not as contentious right now. The candidates have been getting along pretty well. There hasn't been a whole lot of negative advertising on the governor's side, but I think in the next 22 days, that's going to change.
All right. I mean, that's about all I got. It just the general in 10 seconds. It's just fascinating to me how much attention and how much money and how, that this primary race is getting.
We knew it was more than normal, but no, like even I was blown away when Vince actually said the total number and the amount that's being put in financially into these primaries. I knew it was high. I did not know it was that high.
Do you think I do have one last stupid question. Does the party itself, when they get into this, because you keep talking about who can win the primary, but who can win the election, and then does the party itself kind of steer, or do they just kind of let it go? If they have someone that's like, hey, we know this guy can win, but he'll never win in November. Like, do they kind of try to manipulate that at all? So the party has their best candidate going forward, or do they just leave it to the people?
Excellent question. And I will say historically, the Pennsylvania Republican Party has been one of the most disciplined in that manner. Not with a heavy hand, not by putting your thumb on the scale, but certainly by vetting and coming up with the best candidate and providing a recommendation. I mean, the reason why the committees exist, whether it's a county committee or a state committee, is to provide a guide to the Republican voter as to who they believe the best candidate is. And I think there's been a void this time around. And not to criticize the leadership of any of the parties, but there certainly has been a gap in leadership as far as helping to decide, who these candidates are, getting to the point where we are today. When it got to the point of having the state committee meeting back in February, the process had already taken place. There was no way they could endorse someone at that point. It was just too many candidates, too much involved, too many factions divided. But I think certainly there could have been a better effort coming into this to, provide guidance and narrow the field. And some candidates may not be prepared for this stage yet, finding other offices for them to run for or working with them and where they can run for other stuff in the future, or certainly making sure that everybody stays at least somewhat friendly to each other, some kind of unity once this thing is over with. And that's been missing this time around.
Okay. Well, you can tell you've done this before because you explained it in a way that we could understand. And we appreciate that because we have I would say Jeff and I have a general curiosity about politics and the motivations of some people and what ways. And we like watching it, but we don't have nearly the history or the just the inside knowledge that you have. So we greatly appreciate you taking a half hour and coming on with us and explaining to us, because this is I would say historic event. But this is, a once in a generational event that we have in primary season, and
at the very least, this is unique.
That's unique.
The least. I mean, I would even argue it's a better word than that, but that's the least. It's unique for sure.
And just from curiosity, I think we saw this with a lot. We wanted to see Trump debate because we'd seen him on TV and we'd seen him, whether it was on Oprah or on, what was the show? He said, You're Fired, The Apprentice. He was a celebrity and we knew him. We saw him at WrestleMania, but we wanted to see him in a debate. I think I want to see how Dr. Oz does in a debate. When he's asked a question, I want to know if he gives an off the top of his head, thoughtful, intelligent response, or as Vince said, does he just go back to his bullet points and says, that's a good question, but I love the home,
And I'll just jump in real quick. I mean, there's been actually been a few debates already. They weren't really televised, or and not a lot of candidates showed up for them. And I have been impressed with Dr. Oz's performance in the debate. He is very polished, and you can tell that he has spent time practicing. And McCormick obviously speaks for himself. His guy's very accomplished, so they're going to put on a good show tonight.
Well, like Oz can't be a dumb guy, regardless of anything else. He has to be rather intelligent.
The other part too, I would imagine just the comfort of speaking in
with
front
the
of people.
cameras,
and only that, giving answers. Like a lot of the stuff, I know it's different questions, but a lot of what Dr. Oz did on screen was answering people's questions, and so that has to lend well for him, I would assume.
The one thing that really plays really well in debates or in speeches is that whenever you can relate an issue or a question to a personal experience, people love that, and it shows that you're genuine, that you have compassion and empathy towards a situation. So be curious to see how the candidates do tonight. Whenever they can relate an experience or relate a question or an issue to something that's happened to them personally in their lives, that always scores very well.
See, when Mark does that to me, it drives me nuts. I tune out.
See, I was just going to say Jeff does that, but he always starts his with, I had a girlfriend once. And then it goes from there. So,
well, Vince, thank you so much. I promise the next time you come on, we will talk Yankees starting rotation. I promise.
All right, sounds great.
We had a good weekend. We are warming up. As the temperature goes up, the bats are warming up.
Just need to stay healthy. Good. Just got to stay healthy.
Absolutely.
So if you agree to come back on, I promise we will talk a little Yankees, a little baseball next time. But that was fantastic.
I was going to say, instead of spending all this money on primary season, they should give that to the Yankees so they could. But then every person that's not a Yankee fan would say, "Oh, I think you guys have enough money," which is a valid.
Exactly.
I was going to say, you made it sound as if they're stupid, but everything they're saying is correct.
No, that is a fair point. The Yankees certainly budget is not an issue.
Well, thank you so much, Vince. Thank you to everybody for watching the Midday Show. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news. And Vince, I hope you come back on again.
We're going to call you back in the fall. I hope you had fun.
For sure. This has been great. Thank you.
Hey, awesome. Thanks, man.
I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. Thanks to Vince Galko. And again, NorthcentralPa.com. Go there for all your local news. Mark and I will see you tomorrow.